a Midnight Waffles podcast.
This is BattleStations, a podcast about the Columbus Destroyers and the Arena Football League. I'm Frank Walker. All right, we have had 2 weeks of the Arena Football League. Heading into week 3, the Columbus Destroyers play Friday night, going to Baltimore to play the Brigade. They go into this game at the bottom of the standings. They're 0-2. By virtue of the tiebreakers, they are below the Washington Valor, who are also 0-2. But the standings, are pretty well stacked at this point. You got Philadelphia and Albany at the top, both 2-0. Then Baltimore and Atlantic City at 1-1. And then the Valor and the Destroyers at 0-2. At this point in the season, it's early. There's no necessarily time. You don't have to worry about panicking or anything yet because, obviously what can happen just as simple as this week. If Columbus can beat Baltimore, then both of those teams are at 1-2. The best the Valor could get to is 1-2, and you have it. You're right back in this thing. It's not time to worry about anything yet. We're early in the season. We haven't even had a home game, which is interesting enough. But hey, I get it. It's just how things work out sometimes. But this last week, that game against Atlantic City, I felt a lot different after watching it than I did after watching the Albany game. After watching the Albany game, the Destroyers looked like they just weren't completely ready to play a game. This week was different. They still made more mistakes than than you would hope for, obviously. There was some, a few things that looked rough. I know they had that one drive where it seemed like Grant Russell just couldn't get away from the rushers. Multiple drives where they had problems keeping people off of him, or maybe he held the ball too long. What I commented on Twitter during the game is, this could be anything from, the pass, the blockers not doing their job, to Russell holding the ball too long, to Coach Sauk potentially, maybe it's the wrong play call, maybe he's calling stuff with too far a drop, who knows. The thing is, these are the types of things that have to get ironed out for you to be a good team. And the thing is, we still got 10 games to go in the season. There's still a chance to do a lot of damage and get into the playoffs and then do what you have to from there. So, but it was encouraging. Grant Russell is starting to show some real talent as far as what he's able to do, having that quote-unquote escapability factor. They've started getting some really exciting play out of their wide receivers. Jensen Stoshak played well. Anthony Amos had some plays. Paul Revis is starting to look like a guy who I think is low-key starting to have that potential to be a star in the league as far as what he might be able to do as he gets more used to the arena game. So I'm excited about what's going on. The exciting news out of today was that now in the practice reports, we're seeing that Donovan Morgan is doing limited practice. Does that mean he plays this week against Baltimore? I don't know. Does that mean he plays the next week against Albany? I really hope so, that he's there for the home opener. That would be awesome. The sooner he can get on the field, the better. Because the more weapons you have, the better things are going to be in this in the game here. So I'm excited for what's going to happen. I'm looking forward to week 3. Again, folks, it's a Friday night game, not like Saturday the last 2 weeks, but a Friday night game this week in Baltimore. So jumping into the show today, we got our weekly quick conversation with Coach Sauk. We do have a cool little interview with Paul Revis, wide receiver for the Destroyers. And then we have a interview with a writer for Arena Insider, Mr. Erik Clark, to give us a preview of the Baltimore Brigade. Welcome to the BattleStations podcast, Coach Matt Sauk. How are you doing this evening, Coach?
I'm doing great. I'm doing well.
All right, good to hear. Had to ask real quick, first of all, did you get a chance at all to enjoy Atlantic City, or was it just a business trip for you, in and out?
It was mostly business. I'm not a huge gambler, but I think I sat down for about 5 minutes, lost about $30, and at that point I was done. But it was cool. The Oceans Resort is literally right on the water, and so we kind of walked down, and as a staff, kind of walked down there, walked the boulevard a little bit, and or boardwalk, I should say. And but yeah, it was a cool place.
Yeah, nice to hear. It sounds like a place I'd want to visit at some point for an away game. Get into the on the field action there. So you've now seen your team 2 weeks. What would you say was that biggest improvement maybe you saw from week 1 to week 2?
Center quarterback exchanges were great. Our protection at times broke down. At times it was the quarterback, drifting. Again, we put up 35 points. We really should have had probably 42. You look at the league nowadays, and 42 wins the games. And like I said, offensively, we went from 19 to 35. So that's, to me, that's a big improvement. That's starting a rookie quarterback. So I'm really happy about that. I feel like we made a lot of progress on offense, especially with the amount of rookies that we have starting, which is probably more than any team in the league. I'm excited for the future. I know that we're going to get better. So, defensively, I thought we played well. We got that one stop. So, again, we're kind of gelling, getting to know each other. It's not going to happen right away, but eventually it will.
All right. And I would say kind of this week watching the game, one player in particular, Paul Revis, started to stick out more and more with his play on the field. How would you, from training camp until now, what have you seen in this kid? Because I know he doesn't really have much history at all, in the Arena Football League at least. What do you see?
Yeah, I like him. He made a couple of big plays, scored a touchdown. He's a little guy who's, extremely agile, and quick, more quick than fast. But I'm trying to figure out, ways to get him into space and to let him work. That's still kind of an ongoing thing where, I'm just kind of learning what guys do, best to make our, offense, gel a little bit quicker. But yeah, he's a good player. I like him. He works hard. He never complains. It doesn't matter how many reps he has to take, but, eventually I think he'll be a good player.
All right. And this week you've got the third of 3 straight road games to start the season. What are the unique challenges there? Is it something with less practice time? Do you think it's kind of been a detriment having this right off the bat? What's your feelings on that?
To me, with such a young team, I think it's good and bad. I think it's good just because it kind of allows us, 3 games obviously to kind of figure out who we are as a team, figure out what our weaknesses are, let the rookies kind of grow a little bit. And then, again, we got that, road game the home game for that 4th game, where we should be at that point, able to kind of understand the game of football, know what goes on in the arena game and play better. And, if we were to play that first game at home, again, that's not a good show for your home fans. And, second game got better. Obviously I'm hoping for, a bigger progress in this 3rd game. But yeah, anytime you play on the road, it's tough. You look at, AFL teams in the history of the AFL, and most teams, even if they're, winners, are, have a losing record on the road. It's just tough to play.
All right, and going into this week, because you talked about it a little bit before, but what can the coaching staff do? We're 2 weeks in. I saw that there was a new lineman on the team this week. What can the coaching staff do to try and fix some of those protection issues or work on improving that offense at this point?
Like I said, there's a combination between, offensive line, quarterback not, throwing to an open guy right away. Again, drifting maybe a little bit too much, maybe a bad play call, here and there that, every time I grade out, these guys, if I think it's a bad play call, I put it in, in their grades where I say, hey, that's my fault on that one. And to me, I had 3 of those play calls in the game, which is to me unacceptable. I try to get it down to about 1 where, where it's just not where at least one play a game where you kind of struggle a little bit and didn't really have a great one. So, once we get that down and get these guys understanding, the arena game, where to run, how to read the coverages, how to adjust your route, stuff like that. Again, it's going to take a little time, and like I said, hopefully by the time we get, home, we'll be a little bit more of a well-oiled machine.
All right, and last week, as we did some in week 1, but even some last week, we're starting to see some of those flashes of the talent that Grant Russell brings to the game, as far as some of that arm strength, some of that ability to even be mobile when he needs to be a little bit. Is that what you were seeing in training camp, and how are you seeing his progression play out so far?
It's been great. Again, the kid's a rookie, and, he's my guy, and that's, he knows that, he's going to have a chance to fail and to be great. It's not always going to be great, and it's not always going to be bad. So my thing is just, every day or every game that he's getting better, he's making his reads quicker, being a little bit more accurate with the football, it really should be his goals going forward. And, he's done a great job. I mean, again, he's learning a new offense, a brand new game, taking snaps underneath the center. There's a lot of adjustment that he has to deal with, and he's done it great so far.
And this week with the game against Baltimore, it's on a Friday night, so the previous two have been on a Saturday. How does that affect your preparations or game week preparations, having that one less day to get ready?
It's always a challenge. I mean, the good thing is we kind of went from a Saturday, flew back on Sunday. We gave a day off on Monday to the guys, just completely off, where they can kind of get treatment if they need it and just kind of relax a little bit. These next 2 days, today and tomorrow, are basically double days where we're doing offense and defense, and special teams on the same days. It creates a little bit of a challenge. We're going to play in, our first game with rounded end zones, which is another challenge. And so, it's just one of those things where you just try to prepare these guys, on short weeks more mentally than you do physically, and just show them as much film as you can and try to make sure that they're, ready, ready to go come game time.
You mentioned this a little bit before, and this is kind of our last question for the evening here, but did you mentioned that 42 points, might get you enough to win anymore. As someone who's been in the league prior to and now with kind of these new timing rules where there's no more 1 minute warning in the first half and in the second half it just goes at 30 seconds, in your mind as a coach, is that cutting down on opportunities for scoring, or is that part of this, or how is that adjustment come in?
To be honest, as a coach, you always try to kind of look back and see, what can I do a little bit differently? In previous years, when I had that fourth and long, you just go for it. It's one of those things. You're not going to try and kick it, but to be honest, with these new timing rules, those are maybe situations where I kick it. It's better to play defense than offense at that point. With the clock being where it's at. So I think it has changed the game. It's definitely made it, I think, a little bit more conservative when it comes to, end of the half and, end of the first half and the second half. It also probably changes the fact that if you're going to onside kick it, you doing it at 2 minutes is useless. You're going to probably have to do it at about 7 minutes because an average drive is right around probably 5 to 6 minutes. So it's completely changed the game. I mean, you got games now going 36 to 27, like the winning team has 36. And I think that happened for 2 games this past week. So it's just, I think it's crazy, but I mean, because I'm used to, and I'm sure you are too, like, you seeing teams in the 50s and 60s. And I just don't think we're going to get that this year, especially with the new change in the timing rules.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there, because it's one of those things where I've started looking at the scores this week and started looking at the scores from a year ago, and it's I think I saw someone comment on Twitter, it's averaging out to about 22 points a game or 20 points a game difference.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're cutting down on probably 3 to 4 possessions by having the no 1 minute. So now you're talking. If you're scoring 35, you've got basically, 5 drives. So if you get stopped twice, it's 7. And normally, like I said, in the old days, you got probably between 9 and 12 drives. So it's really cut down on the ability to score, but it also makes scoring more important, where you have to be more efficient on an offense. And I think that's why you're seeing teams do more 3-step and take less risks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this evening, Coach. No, we got a lot to get to, so good luck on Friday. Thank you. And welcome to the BattleStations podcast, Mr. Paul Revis. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well. Appreciate the call.
All right. Well, I will say what you've provided for fans in these first couple weeks is you're a lot of fun to watch. Let me ask him, has that always been kind of your role on a team where you'll make these kind of underneath passes and then you try and break them long, or how would you normally describe your play style?
I definitely like to kind of be considered like a spark plug. I mean, big plays kind of hand in hand with that, so I like to be a game changer, and I feel like I've kind of done that for at least most of my career. In high school, I was a big playmaker, and in college, I've definitely made a handful of plays here and there and broke a lot of records there, so that was definitely something I take pride in, is making those like smaller plays turn into big plays and change the whole game up.
Yeah, and I do see. Yeah, you went to school out in Western Oregon, right?
Correct.
All right. And how is that? So what got you as a kid from Oregon to come out? I mean, to come out east all the way to Columbus to play? Did Coach reach out to you, or how'd you get out here?
Matt Sauk, the head coach, reached out to me. Like I was literally in class, and I got a phone call from the guy. He said, "Hey, if you have any interest in playing football, you got a chance to come on and work your way for a spot." And I was like, I've been kind of working for a spot on a team for a long time now. I had a pro day that it didn't go great, but I mean, it gave me an opportunity, and it kept my name in the loop enough so Coach Sauk at least could find me. And so I got this opportunity. I'm just trying to make the most of it and see if I can keep climbing the ladder to, another league, another team, all types of stuff. So.
All right, good to hear. It's always kind of cool to hear guys' stories about how they're still trying to stay in it, wanting to see what they can push and what they can do. So, as a receiver, how has that transition been to the Arena Football League, having the smaller field and the walls and all that? What's it been like for you personally?
It's definitely been a challenging little aspect. I mean, there's a lot of things about the game that kind of change up, like where you can't really do what you do in outdoor football. So, I've had to learn a lot of ins and outs. Luckily, we got a lot of vets on this team. Like on the defensive side, they've helped me out a ton of just like how I'm supposed to kind of run routes and kind of adjust some stuff like that where, you can use the wall to your advantage or you can use your speed way more so instead of just, breaking people off with really hard routes and stuff. So it's been a lot of interesting things, but a lot of things that I could take away that have been really helpful too.
Okay, so in the Arena Football League, definitely it's a kind of a different kind of game, be a little faster and whatnot than the outdoor variety. How, as far as reading defense is different? I mean, is it something where you realize, okay, I've only got a second or two before I got to turn my head, or how's that speed adjustment been?
It's definitely been a big speed adjustment. I mean, there's a lot of different like coverages in this game that you don't really see in outdoor football. Where there's only 3 DBs that really can kind of dictate the whole field. So you kind of got to see where people are lining up pre-snap and their post-snap. They could be in completely different areas, which in outdoor football you don't see a ton, but it does happen every once in a while. So it's been a big adjustment, but I think one of my favorite things is just kind of trying to read the field and trying to get a read for other stuff. I think I have a pretty good set of eyes on me, and I'm blessed to be able to kind of read defenses on the fly like that. So it's been definitely challenging at times, but I think I'm kind of picking it up week by week for sure.
All right, and we asked Grant Russell this a week or so ago, and we talked with him. When you're getting ready for a game, is there certain music you're listening to? Is there something you watch first? I mean, what is it you do to get pumped up to get into that?
Honestly, I definitely
get into that
music,
attitude to get ready to go
I
on
like
the
to
field.
be kind of quiet. I try to find a quiet place or like a quiet zone before I really turn it on. I feel like right when the lights hit, like there's just something that hits me too naturally, and I just use all that energy on the field. But I think pre-game, I'm kind of just listening to any type of hip-hop and rap kind of music, and it doesn't really matter the artist and stuff, but I like a good vibe, and then I just kind of keep cool, keep calm to myself, and then I just kind of turn it on when the game starts. Try to conserve my energy, I guess, but I usually have plenty of energy for the game and plenty of fun on the field, so it's all good.
All right, and coming out to play for the Destroyers, has this been your first visit out to Ohio, out to Columbus, out to this area?
Really, a cool little area, honestly. Just knowing how they love Ohio State football, I'm just so excited to see the first home game and see all the fans and see how the state of Ohio and football really is represented. So it's been just a huge honor to be a part of it for the start, and I hope we make the most of it the rest of the season. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight, Mr. Revis, and good luck on Friday night. And welcome to the BattleStations podcast, writer for Arena Insider, Erik Clark. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing good, Frank. How about yourself?
I'm doing real well. Thanks for asking. Erik was kind enough to call in this evening, give us some insights into the Baltimore Brigade before they play with the Destroyer, before they face off the Destroyers this Friday over in Baltimore. So first question for you, Erik. How are the Brigade, how are they stacking up compared to expectations for this season?
Compared to expectations, you can feel as though they have a level of execution they feel as though they should be. Coach Smith, every day that I've been speaking to him, has a unwavering amount of confidence in his quarterback, Shane Boyd. But it's like he's kind of trying to back up his decision to go with Shane and give him this chance as a inexperienced AFL QB, but kind of been around the town, a couple stops in the NFL, saying his preparation, his leadership, and everything like that was going to take the Brigade over the top to the next level, so that way they can avenge their loss in the Arena Bowl last year after that upset. So right now, I feel like the execution is just not up to par where they want to go. The offense isn't crisp. The defense makes big plays, but isn't consistent. So I feel like they aren't anywhere near that peak level right now.
All right, and it's interesting to hear you talk about Shane Boyd, because he's kind of this guy that when you look at his career, he's been in different stops around the Arena Football League, and in most seasons he wasn't the guy. I mean, the only year where he had more than 100 attempts was in San Antonio in 2014. Is this his chance to be the guy to show that he can be a stable quarterback for an Arena Football League team?
I think absolutely. Again, going to confidence Coach Smith has, and then even his wide receivers. This past weekend, Friday night, him and Milton had an unbelievable connection on the long ball. Milton caught 2 40-yard bombs, and Shane, as he said, has basically belief in Milton to make any type of play. And when you looked at it on Friday, he came out there with a determination to make everyone know that he is the guy. He is the leader. He was trying to get the fans involved, trying to get the defense hype. On the big beginning of the second quarter play, I said that was the key moment of our loss to the Soul last Friday. He made a throw to Brandon Collins on 4th and 4, a little too hard, where he just needed to make a little touch pass. He immediately took blame for it. The team rallied around him. Coach brought him in and said, we're going to come back in this game because of him. And even after the game, he said, even with the lack of execution, offensively and defensively, Coach Smith had no problems with how Shane played these past 2 weeks. The first week was a perfectly clean game, no turnovers. And I think Coach Smith feels like the Brigade has our quarterback to take us where we need to go this year.
All right, and you mentioned that game against Philadelphia this past week. What was it? I mean, what was it this week that went wrong for the Brigade against the Soul? I mean, was it that one play? Were there some things that you saw that weren't quite as tight as they wanted them to? What didn't really work for them this last week?
Well, it seemed like the game plan, which I'm still trying to figure out and get some more insight in what's going on with Joe Hills. He continued his impressive streak of getting a touchdown pass. Of course, he's missed a touchdown in a consecutive game. We all know that. But it seemed like they were trying to get James Romaine in the middle of the field. He shut down the middle of the field. So then that opened up the outside for Milton to take advantage of the deep ball. But it seemed like we got too hungry with it and didn't want to consistently continue drive. So it was, instead of working how we usually do, middle of the field with BT, Brandon Tompkins, for those that don't know, and then maybe Roy to get some short first down calls when there's like 2 or 3 yards to go. I think it was just all or nothing, and I feel like that's the only part where he felt like receiver needs to run a crisper route to get open, because a lot of shallow crosses to the go route on the outside has basically been the bread and butter of the Brigade, most ASL teams, honestly, but especially the Brigade that have Milton open it up, Joe Hills on the slant underneath, and then Brandon Tompkins on the long drag route or shallow cross, but we just couldn't get the middle of the field open for whatever reason. So then there was a lot of pressure on Milton to make the big plays. It wasn't any consistency. More, we want to be the bullies, to get Big Rory involved, to get Milton on big end zone catches and make it a threat, but not to make it the big idea of the whole offense. But then on the defensive side, it's a lack of communication. It was a breakdown. I believe it was in the third quarter where Joe Powell missed his assignment, and him and trying to I'm trying to think of the wide receiver that got mixed up, but I can't think of it right now. But he had missed his wide open receiving, and then Rudaball had a wide open fade route to the end zone, and that's what basically put them up 2 scores. So.
All right. Now, when it comes to midnight Friday night or Saturday morning, people are checking things out. If the Brigade win this game, what did they do right? What was it that they would have done that would have? In your mind, if they're trying to plan out for the Destroyers, what is it they're wanting to make sure happens right for them?
I think they want to set the tone with the offensive line. Again, I don't believe that we want to be this pass happy team in crucial moments in goal line situations. We want to, of course, keep the field open, make solid passes. We want to use the middle of the field and then be able to punch it in with the run game and not feel as though when we get in an already crowded end zone area that we have to rely on Shane to make some tight window throws and feel as though we had no threat of the running game. Back in that, like I said, that second quarter, that big time play went to the 4 passes because they didn't have any belief in the run blocking against the Soul. So I believe if the Brigade win Friday night against the Destroyers, it will be due to the running game and being able to punch things in a little bit more consistently when it's 5 yards to go to goal line. That running game will be the big difference and just make them feel confident.
All right. Now, as it's kind of a question that circulates a little bit around the AFL. As someone who's there on the ground, how are you seeing this team being kind of embraced by the city locally? I mean, is it something where they're still trying to find their identity as far as the local fans, or fans starting to catch on to it? How would you, I guess, kind of measure that right now?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that still is trying to pick up steam here. I'll say winning basically brings fans in. So, but with an Arena Bowl loss, it's kind of just having the average fan here in Baltimore, just it's arena football, not kind of having the steady thing that some other cities in the Arena Football League have, as we just saw up in Atlantic City. You might criticize how they got the fans there, but they were able to get the fans there. Have a hard time saying if we did the same thing, we would be able to get the same amount of fans here in Baltimore. And I believe I'm trying to figure out what's that issue there, because they're being on the ground level, seeing how fun of an event it is, how family friendly it is, how energetic it is, how great our team is in such a short amount of time. It still hasn't been catching on yet, but I'm trying to do everything I can by being a Radford Arena insider and trying to spread the knowledge on every podcast that I can, every social media website that I can, to kind of get behind these great guys. Because these are people that you can meet after the game. We always say go on the field where you can meet these players face to face. A lot of people went to colleges in the area, like Milton Williams went to Delaware State University. And so a lot of people in this area go to colleges in that realm. So I believe they realize that these are people that they can just relate to, and maybe can grasp it that way, understand that we are one of the top teams in the league. It's a small league, that maybe that's what's going to be able to get the Brigade to be embraced and get more fans at the game, so we can get to those 1,000 marks more consistently, especially having such a great arena like the Royal Farms Arena.
All right, and I'll wrap up tonight asking you kind of the question. I guess it's my question of the week. Okay, so we've had 2 weeks now of seeing how these new timing rules are affecting things, and it looks as if maybe there's some correlation between that and the drop-off in scoring. What has been your feeling watching games and seeing how this is all played out with those new timing rules?
I can honestly say I'm not a huge fan of the new timing rules. I feel like it's a risk to try to make a game quick when you're still trying to build a fan base. A lot of people, I guess, you take the Major League Baseball approach that if something seems too long, then it may seem boring to the average fan. But in the Arena Football League, those stoppages and things of that nature create a more high-scoring game. So if we're getting back down to average NFL scores, especially with how the NFL's opened up, then we're not really setting ourselves apart where anything can happen in the blink of 5 seconds while we're just wasting it while teams are getting set and things like that. I think it's a big swing. Again, I saw a comment on your Twitter feed that getting that 1 minute warning on that unpopular rule change. I would tend to agree there that the 59, 51 games that we get to kind of let teams warm up, or even afford to have bad moments would be beneficial, as opposed to like going back to Friday's game when you get a defensive struggle in the first quarter, 6-6, I believe. But that just triggers that you're not able to make up those points because of the new timing rules and give people more excitement at the end of the game.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight, Mr. Clark, and hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Hope to talk to you soon, Frank.
All right. Do want to thank all our guests for coming on the show again. Do want to take a quick moment to apologize. As I was cutting the episode together, I realized we're having some kind of audio issue there on our phone calls where sometimes things are overlapping. I left the interviews intact and didn't just cut those parts out entirely because I figured, you might get something out of them as opposed to if I just cut the whole thing, then you'll get nothing. So I do apologize. Something I'm going to try and look into and try and get fixed. So last couple things on the show this week. Just kind of some bigger league in general stuff. You heard me ask a couple of the guests about these 1-minute timing rules. I didn't ask Mr. Revis about it because he doesn't have any previous experience in arena football, so I figured he wouldn't have much on it there. But these timing rules, I know the idea was to try and rush the game, which they're doing. But I feel like it's happening at the expense of the excitement of the game. Because there's two things. One thing, scoring is down. I don't think anyone would argue that scoring has been down in this year so far. I was comparing this year to last, and when you look at it, it's not even close. Week 1 this year, the highest scoring game was 51-59. After that, you got a 41-48, and then 19-35. Week 2, we're jumping down even further. The Soul beat the Brigade 36-27. The Destroyers lost to the Blackjacks 35-42. Albany beat Washington 36-27. Whereas when you go into weeks 1 and 2 of last year, again, only 4 teams, but still, week 1, the Valor lose to the Brigade 56-61. Week 2, the Soul beat the Empire 56-35. Week 2, the Brigade lose to the Soul 54-49. So in those 3 games, so much smaller sample size, you've got 4 instances of a team scoring over 50, whereas in 3 games, you had 4 teams score over 50. This year so far, you have 2. That was week 1, Washington and Baltimore was a 59-51. So it's something's going on, and I think the timing rule is the easiest thing to do. If you follow me on Twitter, you saw me kind of talk about this today, and someone responded with, they guessed we'd be down, a few scores. You heard Coach Sauk talk about it, then he said, you lose this many possessions, which obviously can be a couple touchdowns here and there. And also, it's not just the timing rule when it comes to the 1-minute warning at the end of the first half and the end of the second half, and the outdoor timing rules at the end of the 2 halves. For a long time, the Arena Football League had a rule that in that final minute, for the clock to keep going, you actually had to advance the ball a yard. The intent was to eliminate kneeling from the game. Well, now there is kneeling in the Arena Football League, and I think it steals that final minute of some of its excitement, that something could go back and forth, that a team could come back and win. We saw it this week in the game between the Destroyers and the Blackjacks. Columbus only lost by 7, but once they lost possession going into that final minute, that was it. We all knew that was it. Whereas before it was, well, they have to get a yard to keep the clock going. And from there, it's changed the game. And I understand that the idea was to try and make it more appealing to fans by making it more, a quicker game. But I think you're trading off excitement, which isn't what anybody would want. I don't think so. Mr. Clark referenced, they talk about how in baseball, the game, you want to speed up the game to get people more involved. But then, you would not speed up the game at the expense of like home runs, which I think that's the trade-off we're ultimately seeing out of the Arena Football League. They're trading off making the game faster for scoring opportunities. Because normally if a team is trying to rush in that last minute, they are shooting for the end zone. They are going for scores. So I think it's something where when they did the announcement of the rules, I was like, we'll see, and now we're seeing, and I'm not so big on it. So that's my take at this point. Another couple of quick stories. AbsoluteArena.net published a story about an event in the, I think it's the American Arena League. It's one of the leagues, for those of you who aren't aware, there's a handful of leagues around this country that either are indoor football or arena football, and they're not to the level of professionalism and well put togetherness that the Arena Football League is. There was an event at an arena, at one of these games, a couple of teams, the New England Bobcats and the Jersey Flight, where a player, a lineman, got an injury, a knee injury. He was having a hard time. And there was apparently no medical personnel around, which is just awful. I mean, that's unconscionable. Apparently the league rules, according to this article, stipulate they have to have something, but apparently they didn't. I will say in my time, I actually helped out with it was a volunteer organization. They call it semi-pro football. If you're familiar with the semi-pro football world, it's essentially a lot of small teams run mostly by volunteers, played by guys who pay for their own equipment, that sort of stuff. Just people who want to keep playing. I mean, the best thing you can talk about it is almost like the way people have like softball leagues. They keep playing football. But even in that, we took every effort we could to have an ambulance at games in case something happened, because you just never knew. So to not see that at a game, this AAL, this American Arena League or whatever it is just awful. I did reach out to someone with the league. They're set up for this stuff. The Arena Football League has things where there were EMTs. I mean, at least the people with the Destroyers I talked to, I'm fairly confident this is spread throughout the sport, or on this league level anyway. There are EMTs and ambulance on site, as well as the Destroyers anyway. I can't speak for all the teams, but the Destroyers apparently also have a team doctor that's part of their crew to make sure things don't happen, which I feel better watching a game knowing that if a guy gets hurt, which somebody's going to get hurt, it's football, that there are the appropriate measures to help. Last thing this week, we finally got the news about the TV deal. It broke Friday, as games were going to happen that night, that nationally, games, apparently you can still get them on Monumental Sports Network, but if you have an ESPN subscription, as far as through like TV, you log into the app, there's your Arena Football League games. It works nationally, it works locally for you, whatever you want to do. So if you want to watch your local coverage, if you want to watch what's going to be on the ESPN app, feel free. I used it. I was real happy with it. I had a weird little issue where it seemed to work much better when I streamed it on my TV than it did like on a phone, which I would think kind of weird because that has to be a higher quality. And I will say that after the first weekend, seeing it on the Monumental Sports Network app, it looked better on the ESPN page, or on through their app. So I thought that was a good move for the Arena Football League. It's huge, honestly. The idea of being able to, you've got this deal with ESPN, and it's not just the app part that's going to be big. The Arena Football League, AFL Bowl 2, or the Arena Bowl this year is going to be on ESPN 2, which is a big deal for the league to be back on ESPN, to be on what is kind of the largest name in sports. It is something that will help draw more interest to the league, and as the league is growing and trying to get that national footprint back, it's these little things that help you sometimes. The fact that you've got that ESPN name on there, that's a big deal. And it's kind of fun, if you're a fan of the league a long time here, that it's just this sense that the Arena Football League is going back to ESPN, kind of somewhere where it started off originally. So I'm excited about it. Again, this week's games, Friday night, the Destroyers go to Baltimore. Saturday night, the Empire go to the Soul. At the same time, the Blackjacks go to the Valor. This is the first week of the season where two games are happening at the same time, so it's going to be hard if you want to try to catch all of them, but I'm excited. The Destroyers are getting better every week, so I'm really excited for this Baltimore game to see what happens and to see how everything plays out. So enjoy the games this weekend, folks, and go Destroyers. Thank you for listening to Battle Stations.